Folks, the election is June 3rd, 2014 for the primary, and then we'll have the election in the fall as well. So today we're meeting the primary candidates, Gregory, Cheadle, Heidi Hall, and Dan Levine. Doug LaMalfa is not with us. Could not make it. I want to remind you that the League of Women Voters is a nonpartisan organization. The League encourages informed and active citizen participation. This is one of the ways that we do that, and influences public policy through education and advocacy. We've partnered tonight with the Record Searchlight to bring you this forum. Thank you for joining us. The order of speaking tonight was determined by lot. Heidi picked number 1. Dan was not here, but he got number 2 by default because Gregory picked number 3. So when we do the opening statements, that's the order that we'll hear from them. And then we'll rotate the person who speaks first so that everybody gets a chance to do that. Each candidate will make an initial presentation of about 3 minutes about their background, their areas of concern, reasons for running for office. After they've made their initial statement, then we'll have questions for the candidates. We'll do those in rotating order. So Dan, you'll answer the first question first, and so on. Any questions? Oh, I forgot one thing. Over here we have Michelle Schroeder. Michelle is our timer. So Michelle, I'm going to talk about the things and you can hold them up. There's a green ticket, a green sign that says 1 minute, and there's a red sign that says stop. So that will give you an idea.
And the warning.
Are you going to use the 30-second warning one?
That's kind of quick, you know.
It's kind of
That's
quick.
why I put it here. I wasn't sure.
Okay.
For me, at least it could be helpful. It seems like an eternity, even though.
Okay.
Okay. So we'll use all 3. I think that because we only have 3 candidates tonight, we'll allow you each 2 minutes for questions. Doesn't mean you have to take the 2 minutes. Be sure to answer the question, be as brief as you want. We can get more questions through it that way. We're going to be here till about 7:30 tonight, and we're going to get done on time. So, with that, Heidi, I think I'll let you start with an opening statement. I've asked the candidates to stand so that you can hear them better.
Thank you. Thank you for coming out tonight. Thank you for putting this on. We've got a number of these around the district, and I think it's great. So thank you for coming out. I'm going to try to very quickly introduce who I am and talk even briefer about why I'm doing this. I did grow up in the Bay Area in a middle-class neighborhood. I didn't come from money or political connections. Just an average family. My parents are teachers. I myself came up through the public school system, as did my kids, and I'm a huge advocate of great public education. I spent my summers and weekends up in Grass Valley, where I ended up moving in 2005, and that's why I'm up here now in this beautiful district. At school, after school, I was able to go on and get a really excellent education. I have a bachelor's from Pomona College in International Relations, a master's from Columbia University in International Relations, and a second master's from Eagleton Institute at Rutgers in Public Policy. And in part that's because I was really interested in this topic, and I was a good student, but also I was able to access federal loans at the time, education loans that required that I work while I was studying and required that I paid them back. And I did. I was able to pay back every single dime, and that was a win-win for everyone, for the country, for myself, and it's another thing that I'm really interested in this campaign. So that's very briefly who I am. I have 2 children, 2 young men. My 19-year-old is in community college, and again, we chose community college because of the issue of debt for kids wanting to go on at 4-year colleges. My 23-year-old is a vet, struggling to live on minimum wage out in Tennessee right now, raise a small family. So those are issues that are close to my heart, how we're going to make jobs for our children, how we treat our vets, how we keep education going. I'm in this race because I am really, really upset with this Congress. Last year we had the most unproductive Congress in history. This year, the new most unproductive Congress in history. I'm sick and tired of the partisan bickering. I do not like the extremism. And my role here is to be a common sense leader looking at on the ground solutions to the challenges we face in rural areas, and that includes economy, high unemployment, high poverty, the long-time need for broadband, the need to help our small businesses grow. We certainly need to be doing a lot more with our forests. We need to be doing some appropriate thing so we don't end up with the next wildfire. We need to be at the table as we're discussing the major water issues that are coming up for this state. My vision for this region is that we can thrive again. We can move forward, not get stuck in the past, be creative, and let's make this gorgeous region what it should be. And that's why I'm running. Thank you.
Thank you. So I'm going to allow you to clap for the opening statements, but when we get to the questions, let's not clap because it just takes time, if that's all right with you. So Dan Levine is second.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It's a pleasure to be here again. It's my second time addressing a Women's League of Voters crowd here in this room. Last year, I did also run for public office for State Senate. The old State Senate district. I'm raising my voice because I'm seeing some folks back there who asked me to. This is a beautiful part of the world, and I love it very dearly. We are an extremely resource-rich area. We're rich in culture. We're still rich in a good community ethic that is essential to politics and to the success of communities. But what we're seeing is that we are a country right now with a lot of troubles, economic troubles, moral and ethical troubles, public health and public safety troubles. I'll go back there in a moment, a little bit about my background. I grew up in New Jersey. I've been in California now almost 5 years. I'm now a property owner here. I'm a farmer. The family business that I grew up in was the wholesale foods business. We sold everything from boxed beef and lamb and chicken to frozen potatoes and vegetables and such things. But that's a business that took a hard turn in the early 2000s when the price of food and the price of commodities went and skyrocketed. A lot of small businesses and quote-unquote middlemen and warehousers and truckers and others in the East Coast and elsewhere started to go out of business, and it started to become much harder for families to afford food. I went on to community college. I went to Rutgers. Actually, that's one thing Heidi and I both shared. We both went to Rutgers. I did go to community college first, though, and affordable, accessible education is a beginning to bigger and better things for students. We need to protect that. I went on for my bachelor's degree in political science. I'm currently pursuing my master's degree in political science. One area where we differ, I studied specifically areas of constitutional law, jurisprudence being the study of the law. I'm more interested in the philosophy behind the law, what makes a law valid, what makes a law even constitutional, because we're a country founded on constitutionality. And so I think that's something to keep in mind when we're looking at how to address our problems as a nation. We have so many problems now that the approach is not to try to fix all the small problems, I believe, on the periphery. It's to remember what made us great. It's to remember our rights and our freedoms, and to fix ourselves from the inside out. Our personal health, our personal economic health, our personal liberty, our personal economic liberty. These are issues that are so important, so fundamental, but we've been getting picked away at from interests, some domestic, some international, big business. And so I think we need to have a very bottom-up approach in fixing our problems, and I really look forward to all of your questions. And I'd like to say a big thank you to the candidates who made it here, but also to the organizations who put this on. This is the key to democracy, people coming out, meeting each other in their communities, and having something to say, and I applaud you all for being here. Thank you.
Now is the time, yea, it is past time, that we stop electing establishment politicians to represent us in Washington. It is establishment politicians that forced upon us a 2,700-page bill that they didn't read, that we had to vote on before we could find out what was in it. A bill that made certain that hundreds of billions of dollars would flow into the big pharmaceutical companies. A bill that trampled on the religious freedoms and liberties of more Americans than any piece of legislation in the history of this country. It is establishment Republicans, and establishment Democrats that seek to do away with the Constitution by enacting international law, as evidenced by the passage of the Organization of American States. It's establishment politicians that seek to increase taxes and regulate us to death, not so that the environment is going to get better, but so that more and more money will flow into these large, gigantic corporations at the expense of small business. It is the establishment politician that seeks to add trillions of dollars to our debt every year, not for the poor, not for the needy, not for the homeless veteran, but for money to go into the coffers to fund the entitlement programs of the filthy rich by way of lucrative government contracts, bailouts, and subsidies for planes that will never be built, for crops that will never be planted, and for taxes that will never be paid. Establishment politicians seek, by way of the war on drugs and the war on crime, to make war on American citizens by using the NSA, the TSA, Homeland Security, and the IRS to wage war on American citizens. And this is just the beginning. I have a bachelor's, and you talk about divisiveness. Coming from an era of racial tension of the 60s, what we have going on today between the Democrats and Republicans is inexcusable, and is causing us to, as a nation, to get to the point where we will not exist. And that's just the beginning.
So now we're going to move on to the questions. All of you should have gotten cards when you came in, or cards and pencils. If you need a card, raise your hand. Somebody will drop a card off where you are, or pick up a card if you have a question. So let's keep these cards sort of rolling in. No clapping. We're going to move really fast now. Dan, first question. Everybody gets to answer this
I just
question?
want to clarify, Susan,
Yeah.
if they still want the 37th one.
Yes.
Two.
Give
I would like it throughout if that's all right.
Okay.
Thank you.
So we'll have 2 minutes for the question. This first one could take you 2 hours, so I'll just warn you ahead of time. What are the 3 most important issues facing the United States at this time, and what are your proposals for dealing with them?
Good question. Well, I tried to stick to a platform that, like I alluded to earlier, it's very simple. It looks to build our core strength as a nation, because I don't believe that you solve your problems by starting with the newest problems and the little bits of problems. I believe you have to start with the core. So to cut it down to 3, I think we have a public health crisis in this country. And I don't mean the way we pay for health care. I mean the way we live our lives, the way our food is inspected, the type of foods that are allowed to pass into the food supply. We're seeing disturbing things like the average mother in this country right now with over 200 random chemicals in her umbilical blood. That's a public health crisis. We need to start more prevention and less reactionary stuff with our health, because let's face it, when we're healthy, no matter what age we are, no matter who we are, when we're healthy, we feel good, we can work, we can enjoy our freedoms, and we can fight for our freedoms. Public safety, and I'll combine public safety along with our national security. I think we have major problems. Our economy, which is the third thing. Our economy is tanking. We're being held and squozing. Our infrastructure is not being invested to. International law and international treaties are seeing a leakage of our businesses to the highest bidder or the lowest bidder, labor sources. If we don't fix our economy, we're not going to be able to educate. We're not going to be able to prevent crime. We're not giving people an option to do anything with their time. So those 3 key issues. We strengthen the way that we approach health. We strengthen the way we approach public safety. We strengthen the way we approach our economic and inner liberties. We see a crisis right now where we have a domestic drone program. We have police-based killings rising more than any other time in American history. We need to look at the way we're spending money, spend it more responsibly, and start worrying more about our own health and safety here at home. Thank you.
Thank you, Dan. Gregory? Yes.
3 key issues: jobs / the economy, religious liberty, and and big government. Jobs/economy boils down to the problem that we have in this country. We have allowed government to become so big and powerful. Government takes from the poor people and gives to the rich. By so doing, look what's happened to our country. Where are the jobs? The jobs are over in China. It's inexcusable that we have facility after facility after facility that has closed down and those jobs have been shipped overseas to China. Inexcusable. But what happens? These large corporations get bigger and bigger and the smaller person is put out of business. Religious liberty. Anytime, historically, anytime a nation quashed the religious liberties of its most innocent people, that was the end of that country. And that's where we are today. Religious liberties are being trampled on, and we're allowing it. Once it happens to the most innocent of us, guess who's next? You are. Big government. Government is not the answer. When we surrender power to the government in the hopes that government's going to make things better, government does not make things better, it makes things worse. There is no benevolent government on this planet. And when we give government power, that power becomes abusive and it's taken out on us.
Thank you. Heidi.
All right. The top issue right now that we have to deal with, and it's top because it's so immediate, is the economy. We've got an economy that tanked in 2008. We're seeing a small recovery happen, but the problem is that that recovery is happening on Wall Street, not on Main Street. We're used to have 3.5% growth for the last number of decades. We're down to 2%, and we're hearing from economists that that is the new normal. In rural areas, we have it even worse. We need to be actively working to get this economy going again. The austerity budgets that Congress has been putting together where they cut and cut and cut and cut without regard to what they're cutting is not the answer. We must close corporate loopholes. We must have a level playing field for business, and we need to be investing in this economy. Debt is also an issue. Now, we're hearing a lot about the debt. To my mind, it's connected to the economy. So as the economy gets going again on Main Street, which helps us all, it will also help us reduce the debt. But we are going to need to take a long-term view and start dealing with that. And the last issue I will mention is climate change. We have extreme weather events all over this country, all over this world. That is not going to change. It's already cost us hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars, and it's changing everything about the way we live. It's a tough issue to tackle, but there's plenty we can do, and we need to start working on that now.
Thank you. So we move on to the next question. Gregory, you are first. I couldn't have phrased it better. Nice segue. Do you believe that climate change is an important issue in the United States? And what should the United States be doing to address this issue?
We have 2 minutes.
2 minutes.
You know, first it was global cooling. Back in the 80s, it was global cooling. Then it became global warming. Now it's climate change. When humans begin to control the orbit of the sun and the earth, there are natural cycles there. And to think that we can control those cycles, to think that we are the problem, that is a problem. The science that's used to substantiate global cooling, same science that's used to substantiate global warming. The problem there is, like I said earlier in my opening statement, any money that's thrown into that they couldn't care less about the environment. That money is going to fund large corporations, billions of dollars that's going to go away from the people to a small select group of people. The climate's not going to make any difference in the climate. Come on. This money is nothing more than a joke to get more money from the poor to make the rich richer. Simple as that.
Heidi?
The IPCC is an international governmental body composed of thousands of scientists from around the world. 97% of them have established that climate change is real. We are seeing it, and I've been aware of it since 1989. The science keeps being repeated and repeated and repeated, and it's true. It's a real issue, It's affecting us today, and it's going to affect our children. My children are going to grow up in a very different world, and we owe it to them. No matter if we can fix it all or not, we owe it to them to take some actions today to deal with climate change. We need to switch to renewable energies. We should have been done this a long time ago. And the first thing we need to do, it's not going to cost a whole lot of money if we take those oil subsidies away that have not been necessary for a very long time and are simply propping up an old and outdated energy system, and start putting those towards initiatives and for renewable energy. We've got wind power, we've got solar power. Bavaria, one of the southern warm parts of Germany, but still much, much colder than this state, is now switched to 25% solar power. It's being done all over the world. We're dragging our feet. It would help us in many more ways besides climate change if we started the switch to renewable energy, and the sooner the better.
Thank you. Dan?
Well, climate change is, of course, or rather, let me rephrase, our climate, our weather is, of course, a massively important issue. It affects everything in our lives. It affects our agriculture. Climate change is an issue to the extent that we see it going on today. I agree very much, however, with both parts of what both the other candidates have said. I believe that there's an economic incentive, absolutely, to control the political tone that we've had in this country for such a long time, why we haven't switched to renewable sources of energy. We could be producing solar energy here more than any other nation on earth. Biodiesel. California now has legalized hemp, and so has the federal government. We have the potential to grow our own fuel here in just a decade or two pilot program across the nation. Why haven't we switched to these affordable fuels? Why do we have the government telling us that climate change is our fault when the United States military and big corporations and international shipping is responsible for the vast amount of the carbon footprint? Why are we, the individuals, just struggling to tend our lives, our ranches, and our homes being asked to cut when our fuel-efficient vehicles, they're not fuel-efficient? Where's the innovation for us, but we're being squeezed? So there is definitely motive there from big corporations and bad government, reducing technologies. We need diesel trucks, we need equipment, but we need to be able to run them domestically. It's a national security issue as well. And the last thing I'll say is this, is that we know to some degree there's been climate change lately. We know pollution is terrible for the environment, it's acidifying the oceans. But there also is technology that we're not aware of in most of our daily lives in this day and age. In Vietnam, the United States government started experimenting with weather alteration with the spraying of chemicals. This is documented fact. We see the spraying of something above our skies daily. So what I would ask you all to do is look into two parts of technology called chemtrails, as well as HARP, which is a contraption that can also influence weather. And we all need to understand why is weather change happening. And who's responsible?
Heidi, question for you first. What is your position on dealing with illegal immigration, and what proposal might you have on this issue?
Okay, thank you. Illegal immigration has been around, the issue has been around for several decades now. We tried an amnesty program under Ronald Reagan, which eased the problem somewhat, but we didn't actually solve the whole problem. And so here we are again with thousands and thousands of illegal immigrants who are necessary to our economy, but not getting the protections they need and have this non-existent pathway to citizenship. And that's the biggest problem. I know people personally who've waited for over 10 years to get through the process and still do not have their citizenship. We are inviting these people here to work in our fields and in our businesses, and then we are telling them you cannot become a citizen. And then we're going to this extremism where we say we want to ship them all home and we'll split up families. And we're not dealing with this right. I know there are a lot of folks who feel like we need to have more security on the border. The fact is we've never had more security on the border. That's not going to solve the problem. We need a path to citizenship. We need to pass a DREAM Act so we're not punishing the children for acts that their parents took that made economic sense at the time. And then we need to come up with a system that is better to find a way where folks can come into this country and work, which benefits our economy, and go back home when they want to, or become citizens and go through the whole process so that there's a level playing field for them as well. I really hope that this next Congress can have the courage to deal with this issue. But so far, we're seeing, once again, this small group of extremists, and you should know where your representative stands on this, but he's part of this small group of extremists who are holding back to even have a vote on this. And we need to have a vote on this, and we need to start solving this problem.
Well, this is a tough question. I think it's good to start with a history lesson. The state of California was founded on illegal immigration. I've been reading of late the biography of John Bidwell, who is the founder of Rancho Chico, and a big figure in North California history. Well, he came out in 1840, I believe. I have to get my dates right. It might be a few years earlier than that, but he ended up meeting a man named Mr. Sutter. Mr. Sutter was the founder of Sacramento, and Sacramento was founded because they built a wall and they put up heavy guns and built a moat and they defended Sacramento. And the history is that the first Mexican general who came to try to enforce Mexican sovereignty and had every right to was repelled, not by force, but ultimately by a mix of intimidation and some payoffs. And the second Mexican general who came up ended up becoming friends with Sutter, and the illegality of the taking of Sacramento was forgotten, and Sacramento was birthed, and what would become California later was birthed. So, you know, I have relatives. My oldest European relative came over to fight in the Revolutionary War. I have Native American heritage, I have Jewish heritage, I have Irish Catholic heritage, I have a lot of heritage. And I don't think the answer is trying to say people who are currently in this country right now are somehow inherently supposed to be somewhere else. I think we need to enforce our laws and our liberties. And I think part of the problem with immigration is obviously that the border was not secured for decades. There's underground tunnels that are bringing in drugs, and we have to really ask ourselves, a man like George W. Bush was governor of Texas for 8 years. He should know more about the border than anything, but yet throughout his presidency, nothing was done about the drugs or about the illegal immigration. So let's not hate on each other, and let's realize that the reason we're so angry today is because our own rights right here in Redding and Chico and everywhere else are being disrespected, and we feel like they have it better than us, meaning immigrants who are undocumented. I don't see it that way. I think we all need to figure out economically how to be stable.
Thank you. Gregory?
Like it or not, we are a nation of laws. Illegal immigration. That's what we're talking about. Illegal. You know, trust me, I've been around enough people who are in this country illegally. Some dear friends and even relatives of mine are in this country illegally. But nevertheless, we are a nation of laws, and until the illegal part is gone, it's going to be illegal. Try to go into any other country in the world and demand to be a citizen of that country. Demand to work in that country. Demand that that government give you all the benefits that belong to a legal resident. Go ahead and demand and see what happens to you. In this country, we become strangely benevolent with respect to illegal activity. You know, we want to take on the burden that the parents, it's the parents' fault. It's not the state's fault that they came here, it's the parents' fault. We have to deal with the consequences of our actions. And as, again, because it is illegal, that's the problem. We need to begin to deporting criminals. In the courts, I see them all the time. We have illegals coming in here, and it burdens down the courts, it burdens down law enforcement, and so forth and so on. So that's where I would begin, is to begin to deport criminals. With respect to everyone else, that's something that we would have to work out. I'm not anti-immigrants being here, but I am against having a rule of law that's constantly violated. Either we are going to have rules and we're going to enforce them, or we're not going to have rules and we're not going to enforce anything. But as long as we have rules, we must abide by those rules. If you want to change it, then go ahead and change it. But until then, illegal is illegal. If I go out to take a magazine because I want to read it so bad, I'm going to jail because it's illegal what I did.
Thank you. Next question, Dan, you'll answer this question first. What is the biggest hurdle to economic recovery in our district, and what would you propose to address it? Part of that might be, how do you bring new jobs to the area?
Absolutely. I came to California to become a landowner. I come from the Garden State. where my grandparents lived, it was a county known for horses, corn, and tomatoes. And almost every year I tended the garden in my grandparents' house, and sometimes I was lucky enough once I got older to run around in the cornfields and the tomato fields and do some work there too. And right now, I mentioned earlier, this is a beautiful and economic resource-rich district. We know that. But what we know, what comes with that, is the need to have excellent stewardship. I've seen my home state fall to so many problems. Sprawl, which makes the price of ag land skyrocket because you're paving over perfectly good ag land for mansions to accommodate folks with the money to buy them or not from the cities. So what I think we need to do here is responsibly look at what we have. And what we have is the ability to be a bigger and better farm and agricultural district. I mentioned hemp earlier, and hemp should not be associated with cannabis, purely on medical cannabis in any way, because hemp is something that George Washington grew. It's something that our founding fathers grew. When tobacco did not yield him the proper price in London, he switched to hemp. So the answer is we need to look at our economy here, and without using false excuses of why certain activities and certain kind of agriculture are damaging our economy or our lands, we need to fully open ourselves up to be able to have access to every crop that there is available to us. In my own life, I was subject to a lawsuit in the past few months by the County of Butte. They alleged that I had done some illegal grading on my property, and lo and behold, I had to go through the expense of hiring a professional geology firm to show that the roads that I had opened up in the old logging area that I had converted to a medical cannabis cultivation area was all pre-existing structures, and that I, as a tax-paying American, had every right under our local grading ordinance to develop that land for my use and for my well-being, and that's what I did. So the answer is we need to stop using the law to hold the economy down across the board.
Thank you, Gregory.
Bringing jobs to the North State, you can't wave a magic wand. The problems that are endemic to the North State are endemic to the United States. As I said earlier, because we have allowed jobs to be, manufacturing jobs to be shipped over to China, because we've allowed these large monopolies to become existent, that's the problem. If you go into, let's say for instance, in the old days, you could go into a store and there would be several nail manufacturers. Today you go into Lowe's or Home Depot, it's the same manufacturer. And so, you know, we're beginning to be at the point where everything is becoming monopolized. We've got to get rid of these monopolies. We've got to break these things apart. We've got to get back to the anti-monopoly laws, because if we don't, there's only going to be one bank, there's going to be one retail outlet, there's going to be only one manufacturer. Go to Lowe's right now, there's only 3 people that make lawnmowers. They're all from the same manufacturer. So that's got to stop. You know, we've got to have the economy grow here by bringing those jobs back from China back into the United States. When we do that, boy, what a difference that's going to make. California's regulatory problems, you know, they force, try to open up a business in California. Good luck. You're going to be permitted to death, you're going to be taxed to death, you're going to be regulated to death. No way. Another problem is labor costs. And in the North State in particular, when I speak with employers, you know what the number 1 and 2 problems are? They can't find someone who's going to pass the drug test, and they can't find someone who's going to work.
Thank you. Heidi?
It's a great question. There's kind of 2 things I want to talk about with this. First of all, to set the stage, our rural areas are different than urban economies. We have special challenges that need to be addressed. The economy up here is based on agriculture, small business, government jobs, and outdoor recreation. In the past, we relied on lumber and mining, and those days are kind of gone. I think we can bring some of that back responsibly, but we need to be moving forward. We need to be looking at new ways, you bringing our American ingenuity to the issues and moving forward. The biggest obstacle to this, I'm just going to say it, has been inactive, sit on your thumbs representation for this area for 3 decades. We do have a government that has a purpose, and that purpose is to help pull together, meet challenges that are too big for the private industry to do on their own. Now, one of the biggest things we could do here to help small business as well as attract more manufacturing jobs is to get broadband out here. We got electricity out here a long time ago because the government stepped in and said, we make that a priority. That's an American value, that the rural areas should have electricity. We should be doing the same thing for broadband, and we haven't. Why? Because we've had no active participation or leadership on this issue. We can attract more jobs, and we can help the 80% of the very small businesses that are businesses up here reach out to areas throughout the state, the country, and even internationally, and expand their home businesses. I'd like us to see us be much more active on that. We can increase our outdoors industry a huge part by putting a little bit of money and a lot of leadership into it. Ag, we need to level the playing field, make it easier for small farmers to work, not be picking winners who get massive amounts of subsidies and leave the rest of the 90% of agriculture without any help at all. There's a lot we can do to make this area thrive. Makes it that the Congress does not have to vote on the Farm Bill every 5 years. It's just sort of in trying to ingrain this subsidy that really has no purpose anymore. Now, when it was established many years ago, it had a great purpose. It had a purpose that was useful. It helped greatly struggling farmers, helped make sure we could all afford milk and staples, and it connected to food stamps at the time because there were poor people who needed help, and they were helping the farmers by helping so they could grow the food that were then distributed to the poor. It was actually a really wonderful system at the time. It's long outdated, and it has become a cash cow for millionaire farmers, and now they're trying to take apart the food subsidy piece from it as well, and that's a problem. I want to just put into perspective for you also the fact that our representative has been talking about defunding the EPA, and I just want to put that into perspective for you. The EPA's budget is $8 billion. This coming year will be $8 billion what they're proposing. That's $8 billion to protect all of our water, all of our air, all the toxic chemicals in this entire country. And the Department of Agriculture's budget is $140 billion, and out of that, our farm subsidies were up to $14 billion last year. Almost twice the budget simply for farm subsidies as the one agency to protect all of our water and air and protect our human health. So I think we need to look at perspective. Where do we provide support to people in our economy, and where is it no longer of use? And this is absolutely something that needs to be looked at. I will look at it.
Thank you, Dan.
Well, the economy is a problem right now. The debt is a problem, and subsidies are payments that are made from a governmental agency to a private individual. So right off the bat, my mind goes to, well, where are we going to cut spending? Where are we going to trim spending? Well, there's lots of areas in the current budget, but when we're going to think about what private individuals or what private businesses are getting direct disbursements and why, it's a very important question. And certainly somewhere there's got to be somewhere to cut back, because I know I'm not getting government subsidies, I'm not getting a government salary, but that doesn't make them inherently wrong. The candidate to my right here made a very good point that at some point subsidies made sense. During wartime, during absolute drought, we had vast populations having to move west. They needed to happen. We needed the food. But now we see that they're killing innovation. I remember coming from the wholesale foods industry, I remember how salesmen had to sell us as wholesalers who sold lots of food oils, how they had to describe GMOs to us. Oh, it's garbage. It's genetically manipulated garbage. But it's cheap. It's real cheap. And so naturally they found a small corner on our shelves, and before we knew a bit about the science, now they've taken over the world. So we're killing innovation. We're paying farmers who are in the dark, basically for practices to grow crops that are of lesser quality, to use more and more chemicals of increased strength. It's reaching the groundwater. Again, I referenced chemicals in the umbilical blood. The blood between a mother and a child should be the most sacred and the most protected, but yet we can't even keep over 200 random chemicals out of there. I mean, it's insane. So subsidies, I think we need to really reevaluate a lot of them and slash them. Why? Because big corporations, huge conglomerates, the huge conglomerates that buy all the crops from small farmers, they're the ones who are fueled with subsidies, who are being fueled by markets. You know, there's countries, Mexico just banned GMO corn. Just banned the stuff. They will not eat it, they will not grow it. They've been farming corn for hundreds and thousands of years. They know a thing or two more about it than us.
Thank you. Next question, Heidi, you will be the first to answer this question. What would you do to reform our prison system?
So this is a big issue nationally and on the state level, and I know that there's a lot of debate on the state level about what we need to do in our prison system, and there's a lot that's happening, and I think much of that is appropriate to handle at the state level. In terms of what Congress can do at the federal level, we do need to look at the number of criminals or people that are coming into the system as criminals because of this 3 strikes you're outlaw, because of pot being considered such a dangerous drug, which it shouldn't be. We need to reform this war on drugs that we've had for so long that has not been effective. We need to be working with Mexico to make sure we're stopping this trade. We need to be working with our states and our local sheriffs to make sure that criminals who are serious, hardcore criminals are housed in the right places, but we don't need to be mixing up minor offenders with serious criminals. So I think, again, this is a tricky one because so much needs to be done at the state level, but at the federal level, we really need to rethink this war on drugs that has failed. And we need to do something different than we're doing now.
Thank you. Dan?
Could you repeat the question? I'm sorry.
I would be happy to. What would you do to reform our prison system?
Well, close to the answer that you just heard, looking at who we put into jail is a big one. I mean, we're putting people in jail in unprecedented numbers. Why? Well, here in California, our prison guards union, our Narcotics Officers Association, our DA and Sheriff's unions are some of the most powerful organizations in the state. That's a good thing, because public safety is important. But what we're finding, especially in a recent string of major corruption busts in San Francisco and other jurisdictions across the state, that the police are not above corruption. People think politicians are corrupt. Well, trust me, law officers are also corrupt. And it's no coincidence that massive drug tunnels let the drugs in. Maybe some of you have heard rumors that the CIA has been coordinating the international drug trade for a long time. Maybe it's true, maybe it's not. But they sure as heck haven't stopped it. You know, for every 700 plant cartel grow in Shasta County or Butte County that's been known about, but not gone after for all these years, well, maybe there's a corrupt district attorney or sheriff or sheriff's organization at the state level interfering and taking bribe money from the Mexican cartels. Again, I don't have any direct proof of that, although I've been told things and I've heard stories, and it's only human nature. So what we need to do about the prison population is we need to bring science and cannabis at an even level. The federal government holds a patent for the medical properties of medical cannabis. The federal government has allowed the legal forced sale of medical cannabis through GW Pharmaceuticals, a Federal Exchange Commission approved corporation. We need to stop having our government, which has essentially become an oligarchic tyranny, from dictating that everything is illegal and for turning our youth into drug addicts for lack of work and good ethic, and for turning everyone into a criminal for trying to utilize their land. We need to basically stand up to our federal government, remind them of our constitutional rights, and do it soon, because I'm not sure we will survive as a nation if we don't. So that's it. We have to stop demonizing the innocent and reverse this terrible system that we have.
Thank you. Gregory?
You know, what we're witnessing is just the demise of society, the demise of the family. You know, when the family was together, you know, there was less crime. You had a father who had the children in line, and so forth and so on. Because we're going to war, we're going away from that, and we're becoming this crazy society, this godless society. We are just beginning to see the symptoms of this. The war on drugs has been a curse to this country. It's called the new Jim Crow. It has a disproportionate effect on blacks. Roughly 2/3 of all black men will experience prison time in their life. Sadly, roughly 50% of black men prior to reaching the age of 21 or 23 will be in prison. So we have a war on drugs that's getting a certain segment of the population disproportionately. And these you know, as I said earlier, the war on drugs is really a war on the American people. You know, it doesn't make sense to punish these people for these minor drug crimes. Fortunately, the problem between crack cocaine and cocaine is being addressed because blacks had crack cocaine the whites had cocaine, the blacks had a much stiffer sentence than the whites who had cocaine. The blacks in Oakland, where I'm from, who had crack cocaine, small little pieces of crack, got, thrown under the prison. The white kids from Alamo, Danville, Black Hawk had pounds of cocaine and just got slapped on the wrist. And do I still have 30 seconds? Oh, good. In addition, we have got to institute programs that will allow us to spend money in educating people rather than imprisoning them. We've got to look at these little kids and say, how in the world can we get you off the street? I'd rather pay 50 grand to have some big brother in Harvard than 50 grand to have him in San Quentin.
Thank you.
There are certain things that should be federalized, but I think overall, states' rights should trump federal rights. This country was founded beautifully. And if you don't like what's going on in a certain state, you can go to another state. You don't like the gun laws in California, you can go to Nevada, you can go to Arizona, whatever. You don't like certain laws, we had this thing about mobility where you could go to different places. But when federal law begins to encroach on states' rights and eliminate states' rights, then we become this thing that the forefathers of this country did not want to happen. Again, when you look at history, when you see an intolerance of the government toward its citizens, that's the end of that country. Look at the persecution that took place in France in the 1798. The guillotine did not spare anybody. And so here we are again, making a larger and larger and larger government. When we allow government to get larger and larger and have more control and more control over us, we lose.
Thank you. Heidi.
We have a democracy with 3 branches of government, right? We have the executive, we have the legislative, and we have the courts. And they're there for a reason. They're checks and balances, and that's been a critical part of this country's history. Balancing state rights and federal rights has always been tricky, and it does depend on the issue, I would agree. And we do have the courts to help us determine that when we get stuck on that issue. I would say that the federal government, for the main part, needs to lay down some common rules and regulations, and needs to be a check on states. But the states should be allowed some freedom to move farther if they want to on some issues, or hold back on some issues. And so there, again, it has to be a balance. I think the issue that comes, the reason it's up so much today, and this is where I have a problem with it, is it's kind of a red herring for people who want to pick and choose which laws they want to follow. And we don't get to do that. That's why we elect representatives. And if we don't like the laws that are being legislated, we vote those people out and we elect new folks. Now, we know the system is a little bit broken. We talked about money in politics, and so states are getting more and more forceful to make sure they're heard. And I think that's okay. But I do believe in this original system that we have, this of checks and balances, and the idea that we need to have both federal and states stepping out, claiming their rights. But I want to make sure that we're talking about what's really going on, not using it as a red herring for people who just simply don't want to follow federal law on some issues.
Thank you. Dan?
Well, I understand the question, and the reason we have so much confusion and fighting over the question is because there's a third point in the quote-unquote authority and freedom that we have as Americans. There's federal authority or federal sovereignty, there's state sovereignty, but then there's something else that's mentioned in the Constitution, the sovereignty of we the people. Federal authority that was founded in the federal Constitution has a Bill of Rights, and so what we found is that that's been the ultimate authority. It's been the equality and equity between us. It's what's said time and time again, that you can't kill me because you don't like the color of my skin or my shoes, or you don't like the music I play. So federal rights have to do with keeping us safe, settling disputes between the states, international relations, regulations. But federal authority does not belong nitpicking. Because who is the federal government now? It's a bunch of corrupt representatives who are bought off by the biggest millionaires. We know that. We've played that card already in this country. So why does the Constitution say, you hear about the 10th Amendment? The 10th Amendment grants sovereignty to the states if it's not explicitly given to the federal government. Well, the 9th Amendment, which comes before the 10th Amendment, says that any powers that are not granted to the federal government or to the states are granted to the people. Now that means this much authority belongs to the federal government, this much authority belongs to the state, and this much belongs to our own sovereignty. It's the one right in the Bill of Rights, that tiny little section that directly gives we the people rights. It's the one that says everything is your freedom and right. Now, we can't go polluting the creeks and the water, so what do I mean? No one, including the government, has the right to discriminate against any individual American citizen, residing person, unless they have a true harm, unless that action is harming the society, the resources that we all share, or there's some kind of scientific reason for why their activity must be intervened with. We arbitrarily create laws in the thousands to hold the sovereignty of we the people down and to make you forget that the 9th Amendment even exists.
Thank you. Heidi, first.
Yeah. Well, wave at me, please, if you can't hear me. You've heard a lot about my positions tonight, and you can find more on my website. I have a website, I have a Facebook campaign page, and I try to be very transparent about what I believe in and what issues I would work on in Congress. So I don't want to repeat what you've already heard me say. I think what it comes down to is that I've traveled abroad, and there are some wonderful things in other countries that I love, and I think we have a lot we can learn from other countries. But I grew up in this country, and I love it. I love American ingenuity. I love our creative force. I love our individualism, which is quite rugged and sometimes tricky. And I love that we do, despite this idea of individualism and we need to have our own rights and our own rights above all. Despite all that talk, I have never lived in a better community than I have in this region, where we all work together to solve problems. We help each other out. We work together to solve business problems, environmental problems. We crowdsource when somebody is struggling. We crowdsource help to that person. There is a coming togetherness that's in this country that is like no other country, and I love it. And it helped me become a better person, and I want that same thing for my children. I want to be a common sense problem solver for this region. I want a positive, uplifting district up here in Northern California where people can look to us and say, look at that gorgeous piece of land. Look at that gorgeous community. We can work together. We can move this country forward. And as a mother of 2 kids who I'm watching grow up in this difficult economy, and as a woman in a system that has not been all that friendly to women, I think we could use a little more women's problem solving in government as well. And I intend to bring every single one of my skills, which include those that I've perfected as a mother. I would bring them all into Congress. Thank you.
Thank you. Dan?
Well, the Constitution is an important document. The Constitution changed the way that this country was. When we first fought the Revolutionary War, we had something called the Articles of Confederation, and they allowed the states to be basically the supreme power. There was a Congressional Congress, which was equated to the federal government at the time. There was no president. It was a body to facilitate solutions amongst the states. Ultimately, the Constitution was a move towards more federal authority under the ever-present, re-emerging threat of British aggression. We know the War of 1812, we were re-invaded. So what do we have to do today? A lot of history has come. We're finding ourselves in a place where maybe we found ourselves long ago feeling oppressed, underappreciated, our liberties are slashed, our ability to earn are slashed. We are polluting our environment. Not you and I, but fossil fuels and plastics and the way we've been fueling our industry. Not industry itself, but the way we've been choosing to fuel industry for this long. To me, it comes back our own personal movements. Every time we, get a ticket or are faced with some law that exists, Law doesn't exist unless it's constitutional. It may exist, but it's what's called void if it's unconstitutional. We have to start with the Constitution, and so many of our laws diverged with logic and science and freedom a long time ago. We need cooperation. The cooperation in the states, in America, was heavens times more than it is today. There was no television distracting us with corporate messages and paid-for political advertising. There was no internet doing the same thing. In some ways, this age is an enlightening age, but whoever controls the media that we're exposed to, ultimately, as ways controls our minds. So locally here, in this district, we have many resources. As a nation, we start to retreat into greater and greater debt. What's going to happen to us? Well, we see certain projects like solar projects in the Nevada desert, projects that are being bidded and granted to the Chinese government. Was that project in exchange to lower debt that we owe the nation of China, or was that just a temporary pleasantry to keep them placated? The point I'm making is we have a law in California swearing that every public official upholds the oath, the Constitution of California and the Constitution of the United States. And yet across the state of California, I have found many people, including people who have come after me personally in law enforcement and in the county government, do not have these sworn oaths. And that in and of itself is the problem. That our own government officials aren't even remembering and being told they must remember and respect the most fundamental of our rights. And that's how large 1,000-page bodies of laws that we've never read, can't read, and can't understand have brought us down. So it's a bottom-up approach. It really is. Politics happens locally. And thank you. Can we all give a round of applause for our guests?
Well, we got to finish.
I'm sorry.
Gregory.
That's no disrespect, Greg.
Yes.
Gregory.
Don't fight me.
Chance.
I'm sorry.
Gregory gets a chance here.
It was what?
Gregory, your closing statement.
Well, since Dan ignored me, I tend to be quite unique in that I'm an anomaly. I came from the inner city. And so I value freedom more than anybody in this room. To grow up in an era where you were not allowed to live in certain neighborhoods because of the color of your skin, that makes me unique. And I love it. I love being able to live where I want to live, so I value freedom. And with that freedom, I was allowed the opportunity to get far more than my forefathers could ever even fantasize. I have a bachelor's degree in psychology. I did pre-med. I have a master's degree in public administration, an option in healthcare administration, and I even have a law degree, a doctor of jurisprudence. That's something that my forefathers would just roll over in their graves if they could. And so I take these things personally in that I have a duty to do those things that I can do to make society a better place. I know it sounds crazy, but that's the way I feel because it's been a great opportunity. I've had a great life, except for, I'm not a millionaire, but I've had a great life. I love living in this country. I love living in the North State. Not only do I practice what I preach, I live it daily. I feed the homeless. I go down in Cheadle, I feed the homeless at the shelter there, which shall remain nameless. I've been a volunteer in the ER. My Friday nights are spent in the ER. I mean, how crazy can a person get to spend their exciting Friday night in the ER? 12 years I've been doing that. So I practice what I preach. I believe in campaign reform. I practice that. I don't take a penny from any entity outside the district. No fundraising outside the district, nothing. I don't take a penny from special interests or corporate interests. I live what I preach. And finally, people say, well, what can I do? There's a whole lot that you can do. The things that are going on, what you need to do and what you can do personally is to boycott these large corporations. Sell your stock in them because those corporations are going to kill you. Support the local banks. Get out of Chase, get out of B of A, get out of Wells Fargo. Support the local banks. And finally, most importantly, if you want to donate, please do so to my campaign.
Up there and go through 15 questions like this, so thank you very much. And I'm going to turn it